Okay, so in the video, he talked a lot about this whole idea of like this winner-take-all system. And when I mentioned it earlier to you, this is an example of what the election turnout would look like from the winner-take-all system. So this is going back a while, but this is the 2012 election. So all of the red states are the states that Mitt Romney won, and all of the blue states are the states that President Obama won. That shows you the popular vote. So sometimes people refer to us as red America, blue America, right? Or this is kind of showing you that we're not quite as ideological within a whole state as it might look. You know, like everybody always talks about how Texas is so Republican. Well, yeah, there are definitely some pockets where it's very Republican, but there's some very deep blue. I heard a man present, he's a professor from UT El Paso. I heard him present last year, and he said that he happens to live in the most Democratic county in the United States, in El Paso, like near it. So, you know, and then when you look at California, by that same token, while California definitely has some very liberal communities, that doesn't mean that the entire state is like that. Every place there's diversity and that sort of thing. This is something, though, that is a very big deal. And the one thing that I don't know that he makes a good enough argument for in the video, the reason candidates only campaign in certain states is because of this idea, because of swing states. There are states that we don't know. They don't have a strong voting tendency of going Republican or Democrat. Ohio is the most important state for a Republican to win. No Republican has won the presidency without winning Ohio. Ohio does not have a strong history of voting Republican or Democrat. Can you imagine what it's like to live in Ohio during an election time? Like, those of us that live in Texas, or if you've always lived in Texas or Oklahoma, like places that have a strong legacy of voting one way, we don't get all the campaign rhetoric. I mean, you think we do, but I mean, I have a cousin that moved to Ohio. She said she'd never seen anything like it. Like, it was just incredible, like the amount of money and just the advertising and how bombarded they are for their 18 electoral votes, like because they're an essential win. Florida, same way. Some years Florida votes Republican, some years they vote Democrat, and that causes candidates to spend an intense amount of time there. So that is because of the winner-take-all feature and the fact that they don't have a strong ideological base. So go ahead, I'm sorry.
Is there a reason why some swing states don't have a specific pattern on how they vote?
So what do we use? What is it that kind of gives us information about how people vote? Like, what have we been talking about?
Education, amount of money they earn.
Like all those demographic things. I think a lot of those states have more diverse demographics. Of voters, maybe. So I think about Florida. I don't know if you've been to Florida much, but to me, Florida's like two states. It's like if you're in the Panhandle, it is very southern. It doesn't feel any different than Alabama. You know, it's like very, you know, there's very rednecky kind of areas, and you know, and I'm not being insensitive. I'm just saying, you know, it's very country in a lot of places. And then the parts of Florida that are so metropolitan to me, and you're walking around and you hear all different kinds of languages, and you know, so the East Coast and the Panhandle are just very, very different. There's a ton of old people in Florida, and old people vote. There's a ton of immigrants. And interestingly enough, even if when you look at the Hispanic or Latino community in Florida, there's so much diversity within the Latino community in Florida. You know, like we said, that Latinos maybe tend to vote Democrat, but not necessarily in Florida, because there's a lot of Latinos that originate from Cuba, and Cuban Americans have been more likely to vote Republican. And so there's just, I think it's the diversity in those states that kind of brings that up. So, okay. All right, here's what I want you guys to do. There are several questions we have not addressed on your paper yet that are really important. So if you will flip it over on the back. Question 1, question 3, and question 4 are all some that I would like you guys to take a look at and see what you can kind of come up with. You know what, question 5 too at this point. Why don't y'all spend some time for like the next 10, 12 minutes or so and see what you can sketch together with your teammates or your partners, and then we'll see what you got.